Mute pregnant woman hiding. Lonely rancher found her and saw his wife in her eyes. Dear listener, before we journey into the untamed American West, I invite you to join our storytelling family. Subscribe to our channel now so you never miss our weekly tales of courage and redemption. I'm curious, where are you listening from today? The plains of Texas, New York City, or perhaps across the ocean? Comment below to let me know. It brings me joy to see how far our stories travel. Now settle in as we visit the rugged frontier of 1870s America, where a chance encounter will forever change two broken lives. Autumn wind whispered through the prairie grass surrounding Jacob Miller's isolated Montana ranch. 5 years had passed since he buried his wife Elizabeth and their unborn child, victims of winter fever. 5 years of speaking more to horses than people. 5 years merely existing. At 42, Jacob's once dark hair showed silver streaks, and lines had deepened around his eyes from squinting against both sun and solitude. He stood on his porch at dawn, surveying his modest kingdom, a 2-room cabin, a barn, and 50 acres, where he raised horses. Movement caught his eye, someone moving along the eastern tree line. Jacob set down his coffee, grabbed his rifle, and descended the porch steps. "Who's there?" he called, voice rough from disuse. A pregnant woman emerged from the shadows, her dress torn, dark hair wild around a pale face. Their eyes met, and Jacob felt an inexplicable jolt of recognition. She stumbled forward and collapsed. Jacob ran to her. Up close, he saw bruises on her face, dried blood on her lip, and fear in eyes that startlingly resembled Elizabeth's. The woman clutched her swollen belly protectively. "I won't hurt you," Jacob said, setting his rifle down. "And can you speak, Mom?" She shook her head, gesturing to her throat and mouth. "You're mute," Jacob realized. "That's all right. Let's get you inside where it's warm." He carried her to the cabin and settled her near the fireplace. Her eyes darted around, lingering on Elizabeth's photograph on the mantel. Jacob offered water, which she drank greedily, her hand never leaving her belly. "You're running from someone," Jacob said, not a question. She nodded, eyes downcast. "Your husband." Another nod, a tear sliding down her cheek. "He did this to you." Jacob gestured to her bruises. She nodded again, a flash of defiance in her eyes. "When is your baby due?" She held up 2 fingers. 2 months. "Do you have family nearby?" She shook her head, her desperation obvious. "You can stay here," Jacob offered, "at least until after the baby comes." Relief and suspicion battled in her expression. She pointed to him, then made a writing gesture. "You want to know why I'd help you?" She nodded. "Because someone once helped my wife when she needed it, and because it's the right thing to do." The woman placed her hand over her heart in thanks. "You need a name," Jacob said. "At least something I can call you." She pointed to his bookshelf. Jacob retrieved a poetry book that had belonged to Elizabeth. The woman flipped through until she found a word. "Grace. Is that your name?" She shook her head, then touched the word again, then pointed to herself. "You want me to call you Grace?" A nod and the faintest smile. "All right then, Grace," Jacob said. "Let's get you cleaned up and fed. You and your child are safe here." They established an uneasy rhythm. Jacob gave Grace his bedroom and moved to a bedroll by the fire. She prepared meals and organized his haphazard kitchen. She found a slate and chalk among Elizabeth's teaching supplies, which she used to communicate when gestures weren't enough. 1 week after her arrival, Jacob returned from the barn to find Grace reaching for a high shelf. Without thinking, he stepped behind her to help. The moment his hand touched hers, Grace flinched violently, backing away until she hit the wall, arms protectively around her belly. Jacob immediately stepped back. "I'm sorry, I wasn't thinking. I won't touch you again without permission." Grace's breathing slowed, shame replacing fear. She wrote, "Not your fault. Bad memories. I understand. We all have ghosts." She studied him, then wrote, "Your wife?" Jacob hesitated but found himself wanting to share. Elizabeth, he said, pointing to the photograph. She was a schoolteacher. We had 3 good years. She was carrying our first child when fever took them both. Grace wrote, I'm sorry. What about you? Who are you running from? Her hand trembled. Married 2 years. Thomas Fletcher, saloon owner, devil when he drinks. She paused. Lost voice as child. Fever. He said no one would believe mute woman. He was wrong, Jacob said firmly. Not first time I ran. He always finds me. Not this time. That evening, Jacob noticed Grace wincing uncomfortably. Eat the baby. She shook her head, writing, normal aches, heavy now. My wife used to say warm compresses helped. Later, as Jacob handed her the warm cloths, their fingers brushed. This time, Grace didn't flinch. The first snow arrived the next day. When Jacob returned to the cabin, he found Grace watching the snowfall, humming softly, a sound that stopped when she noticed him. You can make sounds, Jacob observed. Grace nodded, writing, can hum, can cry, can laugh, just no words. It's a pretty tune. Don't stop on my account. That night, during a fierce storm, Grace appeared at his door, frightened. They sat by the fire until she fell asleep on the sofa. Jacob covered her with a blanket. Who are you, Grace? He whispered. And why do you feel like someone I've been waiting for? As October ended, Jacob realized his supplies wouldn't last the winter for 2 people, soon 3. He needed to visit Prosperity Junction, 15 miles away. I need to go for supplies, he told Grace. It'll take 2 days. Fear flashed in her eyes. Not safe to leave me. No one knows you're here, and I need to fetch Dr. Wilson for when the baby comes. Grace wrote, no doctor. Thomas pays doctors for information. Martha Wilson isn't like that. She's a good woman. Grace reluctantly agreed. The next morning, as Jacob prepared to leave, she grabbed his arm, pointing to herself, then to the ground, a staying motion. You'll be here when I get back. She nodded emphatically, then touched his cheek, the first contact she had initiated. In Prosperity Junction, Jacob purchased supplies and visited Dr. Martha Wilson, explaining Grace's situation without revealing identifiable details. So you've taken in a pregnant, mute woman running from an abusive husband, Dr. Wilson summarized. I'll come when needed. She studied Jacob's face. Be careful, not just of her husband, but of your own heart. 5 years is a long time to grieve alone. Jacob felt his cheeks warm. It's not like that. On his return journey, 3 riders approached. The lead rider, well-dressed with cold eyes, addressed him. We're looking for a woman, dark hair, mute, heavy with child. Name's Eleanor Fletcher. Jacob kept his expression neutral. Haven't seen anyone like that? I live alone. If you see her, there's $50 for information. She's my wife. Ran off in a delicate condition. I'll keep an eye out, Jacob lied. He pushed his horses harder, relieved to find smoke rising from his chimney. Grace met him at the door, showing him her slate. Riders came, hid in cellar. They searched barn. I met them. Your husband, Thomas Fletcher, is looking for you. Eleanor. Grace's eyes widened at the use of her real name. He's offering $50 for information, she wrote frantically. You didn't tell. Of course not, Jacob said, hurt by the question. For the next 2 weeks, they lived in cautious peace. Jacob taught Grace to use the shotgun and prepared the cellar as a hiding place. One evening, Jacob asked, what will you do after, when it's safe to travel? Grace wrote, I don't know. Keep running, I suppose. You could stay here with me. Seeing her startled expression, he added, just as a safe place for you and the child. Grace's eyes filled with tears. She took his hand and kissed his palm, a gesture more eloquent than words. That night, Jacob heard horses approaching. He woke Grace. Someone's coming. Take Hope and hide in the cellar. Once Grace was hidden, Jacob positioned himself by the window. Outside stood Fletcher and 2 men. Miller, Fletcher called, come out and talk. Jacob stepped onto the porch. Kind of late for a social call. Fletcher dismounted. I've been asking about you. You bought women's things and baby supplies recently. Why would a man living alone need such items? My sister's expecting. Thought I'd send a gift. I think you're lying. I think my wife is here. Jacob blocked the porch steps. You'll need a warrant to search my home. Fletcher laughed coldly. Warrant? Out here. His hand moved to his gun. Stand aside. Jacob allowed Fletcher's man to search the cabin, praying the cellar hiding place would remain undiscovered. There's no one here, the man reported after searching. Fletcher examined the small room where Grace slept, eyes lingering on the newly built cradle. What's this for? It was my wife's, Jacob lied. I couldn't bring myself to get rid of it. Fletcher's certainty wavered. If I find out you're lying, I'll burn this place to the ground with you in it. After they departed, Jacob released Grace from the cellar. Fletcher suspects, but they didn't find you. Grace wrote, he won't give up. Never does. Neither will I. Over the next week, Jacob intensified Grace's training with the shotgun and sent a letter to the territorial marshal requesting assistance. Christmas approached, bringing mixed emotions. Jacob carved a wooden horse for the baby and made a silver brooch for Grace. Grace knitted him a scarf and mended his coat. On Christmas Eve, they exchanged gifts by a fire bright with pine boughs. When Grace saw the brooch, tears filled her eyes. She pinned it to her dress, then presented Jacob with her gifts. Later, she kissed his cheek, a Christmas gift more precious than any other. January brought an unexpected thaw that made Jacob uneasy. His fears proved justified when, while mending a fence, he spotted riders approaching, Fletcher, his 2 men, and a new man wearing a deputy's badge. Jacob rode out to meet them, hoping to divert attention from the cabin. Miller, Fletcher called, this is Deputy Harkins. He's come to help me recover my property. This man has no claim on my property, Jacob told the deputy. Not the land, Fletcher interrupted. My wife and child. Mr. Miller, the deputy said, if there's a woman here, we need to see her. Mr. Fletcher has legal rights. There's no one here but me, Fletcher smiled thinly. This time we'll be more thorough. As they rode toward the cabin, Jacob suddenly galloped ahead. Race, you there, he called, a desperate ploy to warn Grace. He reached the cabin first, bursting through the door. Grace, hide! Now! To his horror, Grace was in the main room with the baby in her arms. She ran for the cellar as Jacob barred the door, buying precious seconds. He pushed a heavy trunk over the cellar entrance just as Fletcher's men broke in. Put it down, Miller, the deputy ordered, his gun raised. Fletcher pushed past him. Where is she? Where's Eleanor? I don't know any Eleanor. Fletcher's eyes darted around, noting signs of a woman's presence. Search everywhere. What's under that trunk? Fletcher asked suddenly. Just the floor, Jacob said too quickly. Fletcher drew his gun. Move it, or I'll put a bullet in you. A sound from below, the baby's cry, quickly muffled, froze everyone. Fletcher smiled triumphantly. Well, leave, Fletcher. Now, Deputy, this man is harboring my wife against her will. The deputy ordered Jacob to move the trunk. Fletcher yanked open the cellar door. Eleanor, it's Thomas. Come up now. One of Fletcher's men brought Grace up from the cellar, clutching her baby protectively. And this must be my child, Fletcher said, reaching for the infant. Grace turned away, shielding the baby. Hope isn't your child, Jacob said suddenly. Eleanor was already pregnant when she fled. The baby isn't yours. Fletcher's face reddened. What are you saying? She ran because you beat her when you found out, accusing her of infidelity. Fletcher turned to Grace. Is this true? Grace nodded. Fletcher lunged at Jacob in blind fury. Was it you? Jacob sidestepped. No, not me, but I wish it had been. Fletcher drew his gun. I'll kill you for this. No, the deputy shouted. But Fletcher raised his gun, and a deafening blast filled the cabin as Grace fired the shotgun she had retrieved from beneath the cellar stairs. Fletcher crumpled to the floor. His men stood frozen in shock. "Self-defense," Jacob said. "He was about to shoot me." The deputy nodded slowly. "Yes, self-defense." After they departed with Fletcher's body, Jacob held Grace close. "It's over. He's gone. You're free." Grace wrote with a trembling hand, "Not what I wanted. Never wanted to kill, I know, but now you get to make your own choices," Grace wrote. "Already started new life? Here, if you still want us?" "I want nothing more," Jacob said. "You and Hope. You've brought my home back to life." Spring came early, as if celebrating Grace's freedom. By March, the snow had retreated, and Hope, now 4 months old, grew stronger daily. The inquest into Fletcher's death was brief. Justifiable homicide in defense of life. Fletcher was buried in an unmarked grave, mourned by no one. Grace blossomed without fear, shadowing her days. She and Hope remained with Jacob, forming a family in all but name. Yet something remained unresolved between them, an unspoken boundary neither had crossed. It was Dr. Wilson who addressed it during a visit. "You've both recovered physically," she observed, "but I wonder if you're suffering from a different ailment, the fear of reaching for happiness when it's standing right in front of you." That evening, Jacob joined Grace on the porch. "Having you and Hope here has been the happiest time since Elizabeth died. I don't want it to end," Grace wrote. "It doesn't have to end." "I want more," Jacob admitted. "I want to be a real family. I love you, Grace." Tears filled her eyes. "Not the same as your Elizabeth, can never replace her." "I don't want you to. Elizabeth was my past. You're my present, my second chance." Grace set aside her slate and kissed him, a kiss that held both vulnerability and hope. Then she wrote a single word, "Yes." They married in May, a simple ceremony in their front yard. Life settled into a sweet rhythm afterward. Jacob expanded the cabin. They acquired more cattle and built a small schoolroom for Hope and perhaps, someday, siblings. Grace's silence remained simply one aspect of who she was. Jacob came to read her so well that they often went days without her needing to write anything. On Hope's first birthday, after the child was asleep, Jacob found Grace looking at Elizabeth's photograph. "I can put it away," he offered. Grace shook her head, writing, "She is part of you, part of this home. She belongs here." Winter came again, gentler than before. On New Year's Eve, Grace presented Jacob with a leather-bound journal. "My story," she wrote, "everything for you to know, for Hope to read someday." She added hesitantly, "Dr. Wilson says there is a doctor in Denver, might help me speak again. Is that what you want? To try?" Grace nodded. "Want to say your name? Want to tell Hope I love her?" Out loud. "Then we'll go when the pass is clear." They arrived in Denver in April. Dr. Samuel Edwards examined Grace thoroughly. "There is damage from the fever," he told them, "but not as extensive as I've seen. With therapy and time, you might recover some speech, not perfect, but functional." "How long?" Grace wrote. "Months, possibly a year, requiring you to stay in Denver initially." They rented an apartment, and Jacob arranged for a neighbor to watch the ranch. Every day, Grace went for therapy, returning exhausted but determined. Hope, now nearly 18 months old, became Grace's unexpected ally, turning exercises into games they played together. 6 months later, Jacob returned to the apartment after running errands. "Papa!" Hope called. "Papa, listen!" "Mama say." Grace took a deep breath and whispered, Jacob." The sound of his name in her voice brought tears to Jacob's eyes. "Again," he whispered. "Jacob," Grace repeated, stronger. "My Jacob, I love you," he murmured. Grace formed the words carefully. I love you too. By spring, Grace's speech had improved significantly. Her voice remained husky, sometimes halting, but she could express basic needs aloud. Their return to the ranch was a true homecoming. On their first evening back, they stood on the porch watching the sunset. "Happy?" Jacob asked. Grace nodded, speaking carefully. "Very happy home with you." "Do you ever think about that day you first arrived? What might have happened if you'd gone another way?" Grace reached for her slate. "Believe it was meant to be. You needed someone to save. I needed to be saved. Hope needed a father. Perfect circle. A perfect circle," Jacob agreed, "though I think you saved me as much as I saved you." Grace spoke the words that mattered most. We saved each other. Inside the cabin, Hope slept peacefully, and on the porch, a man once broken by loss and a woman who had found her voice stood together, their shared path stretching before them like a promise. Grace had arrived in silence, but found not just her voice, but her home, her family, and herself, speaking volumes in both words and silence. In the language of love that needed no translation,